The patrol goes silent at 300 hours. 6 men, full gear, standard sweep of the perimeter. The radio operator back at base tries twice to raise them. Static, then nothing. When the sun comes up 4 hours later, the search team finds their rifles, stacked in a perfect circle in the middle of a rice paddy. Still warm, the men are gone. But every soldier in that firebase saw the lights the night before, saw them hover over that exact spot, saw them move in ways nothing should move. And no one ever saw those 6 men again. This isn't a story from one war. It's a pattern, a recurring nightmare that spans continents and decades. From the frozen trenches of the Eastern Front to the jungles of Southeast Asia to the deserts of the Middle East, soldiers have watched lights appear over battlefields, lights that don't belong to any aircraft in any arsenal, lights that seem to watch, to choose. And when those lights appear, something else happens. Something the after-action reports can't explain. Men vanish, entire units report missing time, and sometimes when the lights leave, the men come back. But they're different. They can't remember where they've been. They can't explain the burns on their skin or why their compasses no longer work. The official term in most military documentation is unexplained aerial phenomena. The men who've seen them call them something else. They call them hunters. December 1944, the Ardennes forest. The Battle of the Bulge is tearing through Belgium, and American forces are dug in against a brutal German offensive. Tech Sergeant William Morrison, 101st Airborne, is hunkered in a foxhole with 3 other men trying to stay alive in sub-zero temperatures. In a letter he wrote to his sister 30 years later, a letter that surfaced in an estate sale in Ohio in 2002, Morrison described something that still haunted him. He wrote that on the night of December 18th, the artillery had gone quiet. The forest was silent except for the wind. Around 200 hours, he saw what he first thought was a flare, a bright orange light drifting slowly over the tree line about 300 meters to the east, but it wasn't falling. It hovered. Then it moved laterally, perfectly level, no sound, no engine noise, just this glowing sphere the size of a truck moving through the air like it was on rails. Morrison said he nudged the man next to him, Private Eddie Chen. Chen looked up and froze. The other 2 men, Corporal Hayes and Private Dalton, saw it too. All 4 of them watched this thing drift across their position. Morrison wrote that it was so bright he could see the texture of the bark on the trees below it, see the snow steaming where the light touched it. The thing moved maybe 100 meters and then stopped, directly over a German machine gun nest they'd been trading fire with all evening. And then Morrison wrote this: the light pulsed once, bright enough that he had to look away. When he looked back, the light was gone, and the German position was silent. At dawn, they moved up to check the nest, found the gun still in position, ammo belts still loaded, but the 4 Germans who'd been operating it were gone. Their gear was there, their weapons, even their boots, but no bodies, no blood, no sign of a fight, just empty uniforms laid out like the men inside them had evaporated. Morrison's letter ends with a single line: "We never reported it. What would we have said? But here's what makes that account more than just a wartime hallucination." 3 other units reported nearly identical lights over the Ardennes that same week. British troops near Bastogne, a Canadian artillery battalion 15 clicks north, and a Belgian resistance cell operating behind German lines. All of them described the same orange sphere, the same silent movement, and all of them reported finding abandoned positions afterward, positions where men had simply disappeared. The military called them Foo Fighters, a term borrowed from a Smokey Stover comic strip that meant nothing in particular, just a label to file away reports that didn't fit the narrative of conventional warfare. Pilots reported them constantly, balls of light that paced bombers over Germany, followed fighter squadrons through the Pacific. They showed up in gun camera footage, in navigator logs, in radio transcripts that were immediately classified and stayed that way for decades. The official explanation, when there was one, was always the same: atmospheric phenomena, St. Elmo's fire, ball lightning, mass misidentification of enemy aircraft. But the pilots knew what aircraft looked like. They'd been dodging them for years. And these lights didn't move like aircraft. They accelerated too fast, made 90-degree turns at speeds that would have torn apart any plane. And they never attacked, they just watched. Now move forward 20 years. Vietnam, 1966. A Marine rifle company is conducting a sweep through the Korengal Valley near the Laotian border. This account comes from a corpsman named Daniel Vargas, who submitted his testimony to a military historian in 1998 as part of an oral history project. Vargas said they'd been humping through triple canopy jungle for 3 days. Standard search and destroy. They'd made contact twice, brief firefights, nothing sustained. On the third night, they set up a defensive perimeter on a ridgeline, claymores out, LPOPs positioned, 50% alert. Vargas was on watch around 100 hours when he noticed the insects had stopped. The jungle is never quiet, but suddenly it was. Dead silent, and then he saw the light. He described it as pale blue, almost white, about the size of a basketball, hovering maybe 30 feet off the ground just beyond the perimeter wire. It wasn't bright enough to illuminate anything around it, just this sphere of light suspended in the darkness. He said he watched it for maybe a minute before he woke up his fire team leader, Staff Sergeant Ochoa. Ochoa looked at it and immediately got on the radio. Within 2 minutes, half the company was awake and staring at this thing. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, just hung there. And then 3 more appeared, spaced out in a perfect line, each one maybe 20 meters from the next. Vargas said Ochoa ordered everyone to stay put. Don't fire, don't move, just watch. So they watched. For nearly 30 minutes, these 4 lights just hovered at the edge of their perimeter, and then without warning, they shot straight up. Vargas said it wasn't like watching something accelerate. It was like watching something blink out of existence in one place and reappear somewhere else. One moment they were there, the next they were gone. Just 4 streaks of light ascending into the canopy and disappearing. The next morning, their platoon sergeant ordered them to sweep the area where the lights had been. They found a clearing, maybe 15 meters across. The ground was scorched, not burned. Scorched, like someone had held a blowtorch to it. The vegetation was gone. The dirt was this weird gray color. And in the center of the clearing were 3 sets of boot prints. American jungle boots, size 11. They followed the prints for about 50 meters until they just stopped. Mid-stride, like whoever was making them had vanished mid-step. Vargas said they radioed it in. Battalion sent an intelligence officer out with a camera crew the next day, took samples, interviewed the men, and then classified the whole thing. Vargas said he never saw any report, never heard another word about it. But he kept the Polaroid he took before the intel guys showed up. He sent a copy of it with his testimony. It shows the clearing, the scorched earth, and those 3 sets of prints going nowhere. Here's what you need to understand. These aren't isolated incidents. Between 1965 and 1972, there are at least 200 documented reports of unexplained aerial phenomena observed by US forces in Vietnam. 200 that made it into official channels. How many more went unreported because the men didn't want to sound crazy, didn't want to end up in a psych eval instead of a firebase? A former Air Force intelligence analyst named Robert Hastings spent 40 years collecting these reports, interviewing witnesses, submitting Freedom of Information Act requests. He's published hundreds of pages of declassified documents. Documents that confirm what the men always knew. The lights were real. They were documented. And someone decided a long time ago that the public didn't need to know about them. But here's where it gets darker. Because the lights don't just appear, they take. June 1968. A long-range reconnaissance patrol operating out of Khe Sanh loses radio contact during a mission near the DMZ. The patrol is 6 men, all experienced, all carrying the latest comms equipment. They miss their scheduled check-in at 2200 hours. Base tries to raise them every hour until dawn. Nothing. They launch a search and rescue operation at first light. It takes 2 days to locate the patrol's last known position. When they find it, they find the equipment, rucksacks, weapons, radios, all of it laid out in a neat circle. The men are gone. No blood, no shell casings, no sign of enemy contact. Just gear arranged in a pattern that no soldier would ever create naturally. And in the center of that circle, the ground is black, vegetation dead in a perfect radius. The search team photographs everything, bags it, takes it back to Khe Sanh, and within 48 hours, a team from MACV arrives. Military Assistance Command, Vietnam. They interview everyone who saw the site, confiscate all the physical evidence, and issue a directive that the patrol was lost to enemy action. KIA, case closed, but 3 months later, one of those men walks out of the jungle. Private First Class Ramon Delgado. He's found by an ARVN patrol near Hue, barefoot, uniform in shreds. He can't tell them where he's been, can't explain the missing 3 months. All he remembers is the lights. He says they were on patrol, moving through a valley, and the sky lit up. He remembers his sergeant yelling, remembers trying to run, and then nothing. He wakes up in a medical tent and they're telling him it's September. The army runs every test they have, neurological, psychological. He's physically healthy, no signs of malnutrition, no evidence he's been held captive. But he's missing 90 days of memory, and there's no explanation for where he was or how he survived. They debrief him for 2 weeks. Then they put him on a plane to Walter Reed Medical Center in DC. And according to his medical records, which his family released after his death in 2004, he spent the next 6 months in psychiatric care. The diagnosis was dissociative fugue state brought on by combat trauma. But the treating physician's notes include something else. A single sentence at the bottom of one session report. Patient continues to insist the lights took him, refuses alternative explanation. Delgado wasn't the only one. A signals intelligence operator stationed at Da Nang named Carl Jensen wrote about his experience in a letter to a paranormal research organization in 1987. Jensen said he was part of a team that intercepted and translated Viet Cong radio traffic. Most of it was tactical. Troop movements, supply routes, standard battlefield communication. But starting in late 1967, they began picking up something else. Reports from VC units in the Central Highlands about what they called ghost lights. The translators thought it was code at first, some kind of operational security language they hadn't cracked, but the reports were too consistent, too descriptive. VC commanders were warning their men to avoid certain areas after dark, areas where the ghost lights had been seen. And when American forces moved into those areas, they found abandoned camps, supplies left behind, weapons still loaded, but no people. Jensen said his team brought it to their commanding officer. He told them to stop translating those reports, said it was superstition, not intelligence, but Jensen kept copies of the intercepts. He sent photocopies with his letter. The translations are crude, but the message is clear. The VC were seeing the same things the Americans were, and they were just as terrified. So what are they? That's the question that doesn't have an answer, at least not one that fits into any framework the military is willing to acknowledge. Some researchers believe they're a natural phenomenon, some kind of electromagnetic effect created by tectonic stress in areas with high seismic activity, the piezoelectric effect. Pressure on crystalline rock generating electrical charges that manifest as visible light. It's a neat theory. It even has some experimental backing, but it doesn't explain the movement, doesn't explain the patterns, and it certainly doesn't explain the disappearances. Other theories lean into classified weapons testing, experimental aircraft, drones before drones were publicly acknowledged, plasma-based propulsion systems, directed energy weapons. The technology exists, or some version of it does now, But did it exist in 1944? In 1968? And if it did, why deploy it in combat zones where your own troops could be affected? Where's the strategic value in terrifying your own forces? There's another possibility, one that most researchers won't say out loud, but that shows up in the margins of their work, that these lights are something else entirely, something not from here. The military has been quietly investigating unidentified aerial phenomena for decades. Project Blue Book ran from 1952 to 1969. Officially, it was closed because the Air Force determined that UFOs posed no threat to national security. But the documents tell a different story. Out of 12,618 reports investigated, 701 remained unidentified. That's not a rounding error, that's a pattern, and those are just the cases that made it into the official record. How many were filed under different classifications? How many were buried entirely? In 2020, the Pentagon released 3 videos recorded by Navy pilots showing objects performing maneuvers that defy known physics, objects tracked on multiple sensor systems, objects that accelerated from a standstill to hypersonic speeds in seconds, objects that dropped from 80,000 feet to sea level in less than a second. The official statement was careful. They confirmed the videos were authentic, confirmed the objects were unidentified, and said the sightings remained under investigation, but they didn't explain them, couldn't explain them. Because explanation requires a framework, and these objects don't fit any framework we have. Now consider that those videos are from 2004 and 2015. Consider that pilots have been reporting identical phenomena for 80 years. And consider that the only thing that's changed is that now someone's willing to admit it. The men who've seen the lights over battlefields know something the rest of us don't. They know that there are things moving through our airspace that don't answer to any flag, don't respond to any challenge, things that appear when men are dying, when the boundary between life and death is thin, when the veil of ordinary reality is torn by violence and fear. Battlefields have always been strange places, places where time feels different, where the impossible becomes routine, where exhausted men see things that can't be explained. But when hundreds of men across different wars, different continents, different decades all describe the same lights, that's not mass hallucination, that's data. There's a case from Korea, 1951. A company from the 2nd Infantry Division is holding a position near the Imjin River when they come under heavy artillery fire from Chinese forces. The bombardment lasts for 6 hours. When it stops, they're expecting a ground assault. Instead, they see the lights, a dozen of them, descending from the clouds in a V formation. The company commander, Captain James Ellsworth, sends an urgent radio report back to regiment, requests instructions. The response is immediate. Do not engage. Observe and report. So they watch. The lights hover over no man's land for maybe 20 minutes, and then they descend lower, low enough that Ellsworth can see details. He describes them as metallic, disc-shaped, with a rotating outer rim that glows white-hot. And as they watch 3 of the lights break formation, they move toward the Chinese positions on the far ridge. There's a burst of light, bright enough to cast shadows in broad daylight. And when it fades, the Chinese artillery has gone silent. Ellsworth's after-action report describes what they found when they advanced the next day. The Chinese positions were intact. The guns were undamaged, but the crews were gone. 200 men vanished. Their weapons stacked neatly, their personal effects untouched, and in the command bunker they found a radio, still on, still transmitting, broadcasting a looping message in Mandarin. The interpreter with Ellsworth's company translated it. The message said, "They came from the sky, they are taking us, do not look at the lights." The broadcast repeated for 6 hours before someone at regiment ordered the radio destroyed. Ellsworth's report was classified immediately. He never spoke about it publicly, but his son found a copy in his effects after he died. He shared it with a military historian in 2010. The historian submitted a FOIA request for the official records. The response came back redacted. Every page blacked out, except the date and unit designation. Now, fast forward to Afghanistan, 2009. A platoon from the 10th Mountain Division is conducting a patrol in the Korengal Valley. This is one of the most hostile areas in the entire country. Constant contact, daily firefights. The men are exhausted, running on adrenaline and caffeine. Around 0300 hours, they're moving through a narrow gorge when their point man stops. Signals contact front, but there's no gunfire, no movement, just a light hovering at the mouth of the gorge. The platoon leader, Staff Sergeant Miguel Torres, radios back to their cop, describes what they're seeing. The radio operator tells him to wait one. 2 minutes later, a voice comes on the radio. Torres doesn't recognize it. The voice asks for a detailed description. Torres provides it. Single light source, pale yellow, approximately 2 meters in diameter, no visible means of propulsion, moving laterally against the wind. The voice tells him to maintain position and keep the light in sight. Torres and his men watch this thing for nearly an hour. It drifts up the gorge, stops, reverses direction. At one point, it drops to within 10 feet of the ground. Torres said later that he could feel heat radiating from it, like standing next to an oven. And then, just before dawn, it ascends rapidly and disappears over the ridgeline. When they return to base, Torres is pulled aside by an intelligence officer. Not someone from his battalion, someone who flew in from Bagram specifically to debrief him. The officer asks the same questions 3 different ways. What did you see? How long did you see it? Did anyone else see it? Torres confirms that all 12 men in his platoon saw the same thing. The officer nods, takes notes, and then tells Torres that he and his men are not to discuss the incident with anyone outside the platoon. Not other units, not family back home, not each other. It's not an order, not officially, but the implication is clear. Torres said he followed that directive for 10 years, only started talking about it after he left the service. And when he did, he found dozens of other veterans who'd seen the same lights in the same valley. Some of them from different years, different units. But the lights were identical. Here's what keeps me awake at night. It's not that these lights exist, it's what happens when they appear. Because the pattern isn't random. The lights show up where men are fighting, where men are dying. And when they leave, men are missing. Not always, but often enough that it's undeniable. There are at least 30 documented cases across 4 wars where American servicemen disappeared under circumstances directly associated with unidentified aerial phenomena. 30 cases where the official explanation is enemy action or desertion or misadventure. But the men who were there tell a different story. They talk about the lights. They talk about how the air felt wrong, how time seemed to stretch, how their equipment malfunctioned, and how, when it was over, people were gone and no one could explain where they went. The truth is that somewhere in a classified database, there's a file, maybe multiple files, detailing every one of these encounters, every missing patrol, every unexplained disappearance, every light over every battlefield. And someone has read those files, someone has analyzed the data, someone has drawn conclusions, but those conclusions remain buried under layers of classification and bureaucratic denial. Because acknowledging that soldiers are disappearing under mysterious circumstances, that unexplained craft are operating in active combat zones, that there's something in our skies that we can't identify, control, or defend against, that would require a conversation that no one in power is ready to have. The men who've seen the lights don't need that conversation. They know what they saw. They know what happened to their friends. And they know that the official story is incomplete at best and deliberately misleading at worst. They've carried that knowledge for decades, kept it quiet because talking about it meant being labeled crazy, unreliable, a threat to unit cohesion. But they're starting to talk now because they're older, because they're out of the service, because they realize that silence hasn't protected them, it's just isolated them. If you're watching this and you've served, you might have seen something you couldn't explain, something that didn't fit the briefing, didn't match the threat assessment, something that made you question what's possible. Maybe you've kept it to yourself. Maybe you've tried to rationalize it. Maybe you've convinced yourself it was exhaustion or stress or a trick of the light. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe what you saw was real. And maybe you're not the only one. The comment section of this channel is full of stories from veterans who thought they were alone, who thought no one would believe them, and then they found others who'd seen the same things, experienced the same impossibilities, and realized they were part of something larger, something that's been happening for as long as men have gone to war. The lights are still out there, over battlefields we've left behind and battlefields we've yet to fight. Watching, waiting, choosing. And somewhere out there, men who should have come home never did. Not because they were killed in action, not because they deserted, but because something took them, and no one who holds the answers is willing to tell us why. If this is your first time hearing these accounts, hit subscribe. There are more stories waiting, stories that don't fit the official narrative, stories that demand to be heard. And if you've experienced something similar, leave a comment. Share your story. These accounts matter. They deserve to be recorded because the truth isn't in the classified files. It's in the memories of the men who were there, and they're finally ready to talk.